I just beat Saint Slayer Spear of Sacrilege, so that means it's time to give my spoiler-free review of the game. But first, I want to thank the team over at Lillymo Games for letting me play the game early to make this video. Let's get started. I received the code for this game on April 10th, which was a Friday, and I didn't actually get to start it until April 12th. I started out on the normal difficulty, and I played for about 2 hours at a time or so, and ended up beating the game at around the 7-hour mark. Then I started a new game on the easy difficulty, and I played that for about another hour. This review is going to be broken up into 5 different categories, and the first one that I want to address is the overall structure of the game. This category is not really going to include positives and negatives. It's more so going to be, this is what the game is, this is what the game isn't. Saint Slayer is a retro-style 2D action platformer, and the studio specifically said that they wanted the game to look and feel exactly like an NES game. It is a stage-based game. There are 21 different stages taking place in different locations. 7 of them feature bosses, and the rest have themed challenges and enemies that you need to defeat or pass in order to progress. The common enemies, so anything that's not a boss, those can come in 3 different colors, and you can tell how strong they are roughly based off its color. Purple enemies are the weakest, blue enemies are stronger, and red enemies are the toughest. When you first start out the game, you will be able to jump, walk, and stab, and you'll learn a few other things along the way as well. If you die but don't run out of lives, you will start again at the beginning of that same stage. From killing enemies and breaking objects, you will get 2 different kinds of currency: orbs and money. Orbs can be used to purchase temporary power-ups or hints at the orb shop, and money can be spent at merchants, and the merchant will only have 1 item available every single time you find them. But I think that you can buy the same item from them multiple times if you want. If you do end up getting a game over, you can put in a password to start on the same level where you died, but you won't have any of your temporary upgrades that you bought. Alternatively, if you get a game over, you can spend some orbs to buy a continue. I was playing on the normal difficulty, and buying a continue costs 7 orbs. The way this game is structured, it being level-based in nature and having the different color enemies and all of this stuff makes sense when you consider what their all of this stuff makes sense given their original vision, which was to create a game that looks and feels like it belongs on the NES. And so next, I want to talk about the retro NES style of the game a little bit more in depth. First off, I want to say that this game is exactly what it is supposed to be. To me, it looks and feels exactly like an NES game, so I think that they fulfilled their vision perfectly. And there's some ways that I think that they did that were really effective. There's some ways that I think they did that were a little bit annoying. And there's some ways that they did that I think they could have avoided. The first one that I want to talk about is the password system. The password system is awesome. Basically, on the main menu, you can put in a password to start on a specific level. When you're playing through the game, I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly if it tells you the password when you start the level or if you get like a game over or something. You can take that password from the level, put it in on the main menu in order to start back at that same stage. All of the stages that are not bosses will also have a treasure hidden somewhere in the level, and the treasure will also give you a little password that you can put in on the main menu, and a lot of them will let you start the game in some kind of special mode. So I think the password system was a really great inclusion in this game, and also allowed them to add some extra fun modes in there too. Another thing that they do that I think works out in their favor is that all of the tutorialization in the game is very minor. For me, this created quite a bit of mystery as to what you can do and what you can't do, and it incentivized me to try different things and play around, and it was often rewarded in-game. In one boss battle, I was having a little bit of trouble, but then I figured out that if you jump and attack in a certain spot, you can actually do twice as much damage by hitting 2 of the boss's weak spots instead of just 1. In a different stage, you follow along a very long path from right to left, and then you take an elevator, and then you go all the way back from left to right to exit right above where you started the level. I accidentally skipped the entire level by bouncing on enemies and landing in the top area right next to the exit. I think this kind of experimentation and finding these little secrets, whether they're intentional or unintentional, make it a lot more fun to replay the certain levels, and they also just kind of reward your curiosity as well. Another thing that I like is that every level feels different and unique. I mentioned earlier that every single stage takes place in a different location, and it's cool to kind of see the progression of the stages and how they fit into the story. The different stages have varying mechanics and objectives that are all only used one time in the game. Next, I want to talk about some things that contribute to that NES style, that look and feel that we've been talking about. And these are not necessarily things I like, but I'm glad that they included them because this game would not look or feel like an NES game without them. As a character, you feel very clunky while you are moving around. You move and attack very slowly, and the knockback is brutal. And what I mean by clunky is that you can't do like a short jump, and you also can't jump from you also can't jump from one spot directly to the spot next to you. If you're trying to jump to somewhere, you have to be moving, and you have to make sure that you're a proper distance away from it because you're not going to be able to make any kind of like mid-air adjustments or anything like that. If an enemy is walking at you and you need to hit them twice to defeat them, there's a pretty good chance that you won't be able to attack quick enough to defeat them before they hit you. I found the knockback to be particularly tough because sometimes enemies will knock you off the stage or knock you into other enemies that will then knock you into something else, and that can be very frustrating, especially on longer levels. But as I already said, I think all 3 of those things were necessary to include to achieve their vision of being like an NES game. There's only one area that I think goes a little bit overboard with the look and feel, and that's with the controls. They intentionally don't use 2 of the face buttons because the NES controller only had a D-pad and 2 face buttons. This was most noticeable when you were near stairs. If you were at the top of a set of stairs and you tried to crouch, you couldn't just crouch and like stab or anything because your character would turn and start going down the stairs. And then you would often be left with your back to an enemy. Hitting up on the D-pad is often used as like an action button. You use that to go into and out of buildings. You use it to talk to NPCs. You use it to go up and down stairs. And I think that felt the most clunky when you were trying to come out of buildings. I don't think they would have been sacrificing very much if they had used like triangle or circle as the action button instead of using up on the D-pad. Another time that it got kind of clunky is that if you were ever trying to attack on stairs, you were going to be holding up on the D-pad to be able to go up the stairs. And if an enemy is coming, you're going to want to hit square to attack them. But hitting up and square at the same time makes you throw your spear. So a lot of times throughout the game, I ended up unintentionally throwing my spear because I was telling the game, I was hitting the buttons for throw spear, but what I actually meant was continue walking up the stairs and also attack. But those things don't exist separately in the game. All of that is to say that I think they did a really good job with the look and feel of this game, even if there was a little bit there that I wasn't a huge fan of. The next thing I want to talk about is the difficulty and progression. I mentioned at the start of the video that I played it on normal difficulty, and this is probably where most of my issues with the game are going to be. Not that I think the game is too hard, but I found the general difficulty of the game to be unbalanced. And what I mean by that is that your normal levels are very difficult. They're so difficult that I don't think I would have been able to beat the entire game without passwords, at least not in the 3 days that I was trying to for this video. In contrast to these very difficult levels, you also have pretty easy bosses. There's 7 or 8 bosses in the game, and I think most of them were pretty easy. To the point where if I was having a hard time with a level and then I got to a boss, I would feel like a sense of relief, and I kind of feel like it should be the other way around. I did play an hour or so on the easy difficulty, and in that hour, I actually got more than halfway through the game, and I did that after having played the entire game on normal, so it probably wouldn't have gone like that if I was playing the game on easy for the first time. But the easy difficulty is way easier. So there's a couple things that make it easier. One is that there's a reduced number of enemies, and another one is that they remove the knockback altogether. And I kind of feel like they should have done like one or the other. I think that playing without the knockback changes the game so much. Another thing that I noticed as far as difficulty is that there's not a way to drop the difficulty mid-game. I don't mean hit start and change the difficulty like on the fly. I mean that the only time that you can choose a difficulty is when you're starting a new game. And I could see this being a little bit frustrating for somebody if they do get to some of the really tough levels like 16 and 17 that are very tough and very long, and they want to like lower the difficulty. The only way that they can really do that is by starting from the very beginning and playing those first 15 levels again. I don't really think that's that big of an issue though, but just keep in mind that you're going to be kind of locked into whatever difficulty you choose. As far as progression goes, you do get stronger spears and new abilities throughout the game, but the stronger weapons don't feel like much of an improvement. At least they didn't to me. Enemies are also getting stronger when you're getting stronger, and you can't go back and play earlier levels with the newer, stronger weapons. Or if you can, I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so, in a way, it almost felt like you were getting weaker as the game went, because as you got further in the game, enemies would do more damage to you. I think level 17 is one that I struggled with a whole bunch. And I got to a point where it was like, all right, I got 8 hit points, and every single time I get hit, I lose 2 of them. So I really was feeling at the end of the game like I actually only had 4 hit points. The next thing I want to talk about is miscellaneous. This is just anything else that I wanted to go ahead and include in this review that I didn't really find a way to fit into a broad category. So these are going to go kind of quick. The first one that I want to talk about is trophies. One of the things that I've enjoyed in the past about Lillymo Games is that they have made a PS4 and a PS5 version of the trophy lists. The PS4 list is typically a lot easier, so I'll typically go in and play the PS4 list for my first time playing, and then later down the line when I feel like replaying the game, I will go in and play the PS5 version of the game so that I can get a different trophy set and ideally end up with 2 platinum trophies. For both versions, you need to beat the game on the classic difficulty, making both lists very, very difficult. And for the PS5 version of the game, you need to beat the game like 10 different times. Next, I want to talk about orbs. Orbs don't matter. Nothing at the orb shop is worth my time. Every once in a while, you could buy like a hint for a treasure or something if you wanted to, but that's more of like a post-game. But that's more of like a second run cleanup type thing. And nothing at the orb shop is as valuable as buying a continue. But you also don't really even need to buy a continue because the password system makes it so that you can just start back wherever you were. The exception to that would be that if you're going for trophies. There are trophies for beating the game on normal and hard without using passwords to skip levels. So in that case, you'll probably want to save your orbs for a continue. But even then, there's also a trophy for beating the game on Classic, and Classic mode disables orbs, and getting that trophy will also automatically pop the trophy for normal and hard. So there's no real reason when you're playing on normal and hard to try to do it without passwords. And that's pretty much it for miscellaneous. The only thing left in this video is to give you my verdict. If you like 2D action platformers, I would recommend this game. If you like shorter, replayable games, I would recommend this game. If you like a challenge, I would also recommend this game. But if you are just in it for the trophies, I would not recommend this game. Partially because this game is pretty tough and the trophies are going to be difficult, but also just because I don't ever recommend playing a game just for the trophies. And I think that's all that I have to say today, guys. Oh, I also, one more thing. I forgot to mention, this game is priced at $10, and I think at $10, this game is a steal. And that is actually all that I have to say about Saint Slayer, Spear of Sacrilege. Until next time, the best way to keep up with me is right here on YouTube. Thanks, guys.